Hi, how's it going everyone? In this video, I'll be sharing with you the best Ionia champions that you can draft in Expedition. This will help you draft better champions and draft stronger cards from their card pool to increase your winning chances in Expedition. The champions have been classified into different tiers, S tier being the highest tier and D tier being the lowest tier. The champions tier is determined by how much impact they create and the strength of their card pool. Z belongs to the highest tier, and it is one of the strongest unit in early game. It has quick attack, and when Z attacks, it summons an exact copy of itself attacking. The extra copy forces the opponent to make unequal trades in order to protect itself and also to prevent Z from leveling up. Most of the time, your opponent won't have enough creatures to block all of Z's attack, and one of your Z's damage is definitely going through. And if your opponent does not have any removals or big creatures to block Z, they are going to have a very hard time winning. In terms of Z's card pool, it is one of the strongest out of all regions. It has almost all the elusive units in Ionia, except for one. It has elusive units like Navari Blade Scout, Navari Conspirator, the Empyrean, Runeterra Hatchling, Green Glade Duo, and Kinko Lifeblade. All these elusive creatures makes the card pool extremely strong. Elusive creatures allow you to hit the opponent's nexus directly, unless the opponent has an elusive creature to block you, or he has any removals or challenger creatures, which is quite hard to come by in Expedition. Besides elusive creatures, there are also other strong creatures like Wind Chaser, which can stun two of your enemy's creatures. This stops them from blocking you and allow your creature to deal lethal damage. There are also cards like Scales of the Dragon and Jewel Protector that can be used to buff your elusive creatures to make them stronger and prevent them from getting removed and allow them to survive longer. Spells wise, it has one of the strongest spells in Ionia, such as Twin Disciplines and Spirit's Refuge, which can be used to protect your elusive to allow them to last longer and deal more direct damage to their opponent's nexus. Overall, we can say that Z is probably one of the strongest champion in Ionia because of the amount of impact it creates in the early game and also the card pool it has. It has so many elusive that you can draft and it allows you to go face every time, and it makes it very hard for the opponent to stop you, and you can get 7 wins more easily. Next is Karma. The advantage of Karma comes from the spells that is generated from her. These spells can often turn the tides of the game. It can be a spell that heals you when you are about to die, and it can be a combat buff that can increase your creature's damage to deal lethal to your opponent. The only weakness of Karma is that it's kind of a dead weight during combat. You won't be using Karma to defend yourself. Karma's card pool is relatively strong. It has a lot of strong late game cards that can increase your winning chances, such as Empyrean and Wind Chaser. I think it is also important to look at the other regions in the card pool also. On the Ferret side, there is She Who Wonders that can obliterate all followers with 4 or less power in play and in hand, and there's also Alpha Wildclaw, which deals a lot of overwhelm damage. In terms of spells, it is not the best. There isn't any good removals. The only removals it has are Avalanche and Shadow Flare. These two removals aren't that great because it affects your creatures as well. It only works well in certain situations where you are trying to kill all the creatures on the board. Overall, this card pool doesn't work well on its own. It lacks strong low-cost creatures and removal spells. The card pool should be combined with other card pool to cover its weakness. Moving on to the B tier, we have Yasuo and Shen. Yasuo is a good 4-cost card that has a good stat line and has quick attack. His ability is a very strong removal if you have stun spells or recall spells in your hand. This brings us to his weakness, which is its ability is conditional upon whether you have stun spells or recall spells. If you don't have stuns or recall, Yasuo is just a good creature, but not strong enough to win you the game. As for Yasuo's card pool, his Ionia cards in the card pool is kind of average. He has a mix of good cards and bad cards. There are good cards like Ren Shadowblade that where it strikes, it can create a Shadow Fiend in your hand. And there's also cards like Jewel Protector that can be used to buff your creatures, and Wind Chaser here. And Shadow Assassins is also quite good as well. Whereas its spells are not the best. There are recall spells and stuns which are not very useful in removing the threat. It's only useful in delaying the threat, and it can only remove threats if you have Yasuo on the board, and that is very conditional as well. But what is very strong about this card pool is that its Noxus cards are very strong. So on the Noxus end, there are very strong removal spells like Cowling Strike and Reckoning. You also have AoE stun like Intimidating Roar, and his creatures have very good stat line and powerful abilities like Minotaur Reckoner that can be used to stun the weakest enemy every round, or cards like Auroch Glinton that can be used to stun all damage and enemies. The low cost Noxus cards are also quite strong. There are cards like Trifarian Glory Seeker that is a 2 for 5/1 that can be used to challenge strong creatures. And there's Reckless Trifarian, which is a very powerful creature that is only 3 mana for 5/4. Moving on to Shen, it's a decent champion that has a nice ability that casts barrier to protect your creatures. But the problem is that Shen's barrier doesn't protect itself. So the opponent will try to kill Shen first, and Shen's health is only enough to last him for 1 to 2 attacks. And essentially, Shen is like a suicide bomber. Shen's ability is very defensive in nature. It does not provide a huge winning impact upon playing it and attacking with it. At the end of the day, you still need a strong creature to combo with Shen in order to take advantage of Shen's ability. As for Shen's card pool, his Ionia cards are somewhat decent. He has a couple of elusives that are quite strong, like Windfarer Hatchling and Empyrean, and there's also Yuzari here. But most of the card pool's value comes from its Demacia side. He has removal spells like Single Combat, and Detain, and Judgment that can be used to wipe out all your enemy's creatures. He also has combat buff like Repose and Prismatic Barrier that can be used to protect your creatures. And besides the spell cards, majority of his creatures are very strong too. And it has a good mix of strong low cost creature and strong high cost creatures. High cost creatures like Bright Steel Formation that can grant all your allies barrier, and strong low cost creatures like Fleet Weather Tracker, Bright Steel Protector that can cast barrier on your Fleet Weather Tracker to challenge other creatures and kill them. There's also Green Fang Warden and Swift Wing Lancer that can generate more creatures for you when it dies. Personally, I've drafted this card pool a couple of times in Expedition. This card pool provides a lot of value when you combine it with other card pools, and it is also very strong on its own. The times where I drafted this card pool, I actually got to 7 wins. Overall, I would say that Shen and its card pool is higher than Yasuo, and it is quite close to Karma's strength and its card pool. And we are left with the last champion, Lee Sin. Lee Sin is probably one of the least impactful champions out of all the Ionia champions. His stat line is not the best, being 6 cost with a 3/6 body. His ability is conditional and kind of awkward to activate. It requires you to cast spells on your own turn before you attack with Lee Sin, and that might not be the best time to cast that spell. If you play with a Lee Sin deck before, you will understand the problem here. Lee Sin is a highly synergistic card that requires a lot of burst spells and fast spells to work, and I'm not quite sure whether you can get so many burst spells and fast spells in Expedition. It feels like it's almost impossible to level up Lee Sin. But if I force myself to look at the positive side of this card, I can only say that this card has Challenger when you cast a spell, which can be quite useful in challenging elusive units and destroying them. As for its card pool is somewhat decent. It does not have the strong cards that can create significant impact, but it has some decent elusive cards from Ionia and Bilgewater, like elusive cards like Solitary Monk, and the Bilgewater elusives are like Zap Spray Fin and Slippery Wave Rider, which is not too bad. It has elusive and it also has Attune, but personally I can't find any compelling reason to choose Lee Sin and its card pool. I think there are way better champions and stronger card pool that I can actually draft from. Well, that's the end of the video. I hope you have found it useful. If you have found it useful, please like the video and share it with your friends. And frankly, I don't think I deserve a subscription right now. I feel that I still have a lot more to offer to you guys and I want to earn your subscription. If you are interested in Expedition tips, you can actually look through my channel. There are a couple of videos on it. And thank you for watching.